You're listening to Do That Well with your hosts, Brenda Brown and Karen Thrall, a podcast about real experiences and how to turn them into life lessons. Unscripted, honest, funny, genuine, and passionate. A series of conversations where we explore every aspect of human interaction and provoke each other to do life well. And this is our last episode for
Wow.
2021.
We
We
did
made
it,
it,
Brenda.
Karen.
Woo! That's incredible.
So at the beginning of the year, Karen, you and I had a goal, which was to release one podcast every single week in 2021, and we made it,
Yeah.
which is very, very
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
And for our last episode this year, we thought it'd be fun if Karen and I are going to share basically 3 lessons that we each learned this year. And this is just a moment for us to share with you things that happen in our lives and some big takeaways that we think might be inspiring for you as well as the listener. Karen, do you want to kick us off or do you want me to go first?
Okay, I'll do one. I'll
Yeah,
do one.
sure.
Okay, so one lesson for sure all year, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping it's become a habit, like we were talking about the habit forming, is listening to my body. Listen to my physical physiology, what's going on in my body. I take it really seriously now because no one knows my body better than I do. And I know what to listen for. I know when something doesn't feel quite right. So I think something I really practiced a lot was listen. What is your body saying? How is your body telling you you are? Because I would make excuses for my body. Like for one that you've heard we've brought up several times is this nervous energy or my hands shaking. And I just always thought it was just who I am, but that's not really honoring my body and find out what my body's actually trying to say. So when I started taking it more seriously, oh man, the stuff that came out, like it was really a gift to me, and it has transformed my thinking on what my body's trying to talk to me, because my body has wisdom, and my
Mhm.
body has a message that maybe my mind doesn't always can't figure out. So that would be my first one, is that I really started to learn how to really listen to my body. And I guess for the listeners, if that's something that intrigues you, let me know. Send me an email or we can chat. But I just think it was significant for my growth. It was significant for my personal development. And I'm really grateful for it. And I want it to continue as a habit. I mean, I feel like I was growing, no pun intended, but I was growing the muscle. But now I'm really liking this rhythm, and I enjoy that's part of who I am.
That's a really good one. I have a question for you about that because I also have been working on being more mindful about listening to my body in the last year, but just in general. And I'm curious, Karen, do you ever feel, I suppose for myself, sometimes I have this moment of wondering if I can trust my body, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Was there a process for you in learning to listen more to your body about like what messages to trust, if that makes sense?
Wow.
Like, sometimes I
Yes.
feel like maybe I'll misconstrue anxiety or stress about something as something else. And
Oh my
so,
gosh.
like, not only listening to your body, but, like, knowing how to interpret what your body's telling you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Sometimes I'm sensitive to what somebody else is experiencing and I assume it's me. And so
Right.
I take on the responsibility and think, okay, what's wrong with me? And I've had to learn this one's not me, because it didn't make sense. Like I'll check in with myself. I'm like, this doesn't align. This doesn't align with how I just was 5 minutes ago. So then I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't me. And so I feel the relief, and I can tell because then I feel relief. Oh yeah, this one's not me. Oh, okay, good. Whew, so glad that's not me. So I've noticed there's a relief that happens if I can catch it, because many times I think it is me. I assume right away it's me, and it's not. And so that one takes a little bit more. I think I'm growing more mature. I'm growing in maturity on that one. So that's probably a work in progress. on when it's not me, and it's just I'm
Mhm.
having compassion or empathy for somebody else, or I'm just picking it up, picking up the
Right.
vibe. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, totally, definitely. Well, and that just it makes me feel better to know that I'm not alone. I guess in that like once I do think once you start listening to your body more, there's this the next layer is well, what's me? What's somebody else's energy maybe I'm picking up? What's truly just me being stressed about something that's happening later today or, you know, I
Yeah.
think understanding what your body's telling you.
Do you know when I notice it the most? And this is an old Karen. Like this is not me anymore. Over the last 2, 3 years, is the response I would get from strangers. I couldn't understand when they'd be curt or cold or rude, and I was just like, "Hi, can I have a glass of water?" I didn't. I was like, "I don't understand. I don't understand what just happened," and I would take it really personally. And then now I know I'm like, "Oh, they're having a really hard day. There's a story I don't know about. They're a stranger to me. They probably don't even know this is how they're sounding." And I'm finding myself activating more compassion because it's not me. Surely, of course, it's not me. And before I used to take it really personally. And you and we've had this conversation so much because even
Right.
in Seattle, when I did the training at Herbivore Botanicals,
Yes.
and remember, I had a whole story leading up to when I was coming to train. It was this thing. So I've been learning this that sometimes just have compassion when it's not me so that I can be more gracious and not want to tell them off.
Well, so that's a really nice segue into one of the things that I had to bring to the table, which again is a topic we have talked about on our podcast before. But this idea that you're really only responsible for your own reality. And in addition to that, that the only assumption that we can ever make when it comes to dealing with other people is that we don't know.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
this like the only thing you can know is your own reality and your
Mhm.
thoughts and your emotions and your motivations and your likes, your dislikes, so on and so forth. But I think it's really safe to assume when you're dealing with other people and relationships, whether that's a conflict or whether that's actually a positive communication that you're having. But I think that's safe to assume that the only thing we can assume is that we don't know. We don't know what other people are thinking. We don't know what the reality is, so on and so forth, unless they tell us. And even then, I know that I don't always articulate and communicate myself 100% with accuracy. So even if someone is telling you how they feel or what they think, we can still assume that that might not be like a truth or the ultimate
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah. The perception, jumping
Mhm.
to conclusions. Yeah. Yeah. So in that, what made you, why is that the lesson? Like what is behind that lesson that made you go, oh, I'm on this quest that I can only be in charge of my own reality. What made you go, I want to practice this more?
Well, to be quite vulnerable for a moment here, but honestly, um, I have always been a big people pleaser. That's always been a really big part of my personality. And I came to the realization a few years back in my life, and it's been an ongoing journey, that when I people please, I'm not respecting my own boundaries and like my own wants and needs. And so, in my need to people please, I often found that I would put myself in a position where I would try to control the way that somebody was going to perceive me, or I was going to control the way that an action I made would be received. To try and think of an example, it might be is something as simple as like,
Yeah.
I'm going to get this treat for this person because I know that, this person really likes this treat. And I know that if I give them this treat, that they're going to like always think of me as this really generous individual. I mean, that's a bad example and I'm just kind of exaggerating here, but, you know, um, and I think for me, realizing in this last year, especially because communications changed so much with everything going on in our world, um, that I can't necessarily do things based off of how I think it's going to be received or perceived. Like I have to do things for my reality, not for someone else's that I can't
Yeah.
even know
Mhm.
what it is.
Mhm. Mhm. It's that whole thing too about I'm doing this because I want to do this. I'm not doing this because I have to do it.
Right.
Like something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that they'll like me more, or I'm being so aware of how it's going to make them feel that I'm sacrificing myself because I know this will make them happy. But it's almost
Mhm.
like a band-aid. It doesn't,
Right.
if they needed that kind of happiness from you, that there's something wrong, you know?
Right.
Is that
Right.
something like that?
Yeah, definitely. And then
Mm,
again, just this idea that like, well, that's very presumptuous of me anyhow to
mm.
assume that I know what's going to make them happy because again, the only thing I can assume is that I don't know. I don't know how that's going to
Yeah.
make them feel. I don't know what their response is going to be.
Mhm.
All I can know is how it's going to make me feel. So if it makes me feel good to give this gift to this person, like that's fine. But
Yeah.
don't do it because I think it's for somebody else.
Mm. That's really good. I remember doing a training. This is several years ago, and I made that mistake. What you just said. Of I started doing things in the training that I assumed they would appreciate, and it backfired on me.
Hmm.
Which and I soon I started realizing, oh no, this is not working. Because I made an assumption, and what was interesting, not to get into the details, but some kind of cool stuff came out of it, out of my error, out of my assuming something they wanted, which they did not want, actually kind of pivoted the training, which
Hmm.
made it really like it really brought a little bit more substance in the end. However, it was at the expense of me making this error in my training. So it was a huge lesson learned that don't do that. Like, don't just because this worked over here with this person doesn't mean it's going to work here. And don't assume that you know what they want. Always ask, always be curious,
Right.
always make suggestions, but keep it an open conversation. So do you feel a little bit as that too? Is sometimes it's better just to ask if you're for assuming?
Definitely. I think so.
Hmm.
I think ultimately it's all just about communication, right?
Yeah.
Actually communicating and seeing where people are at versus just going with what narrative or story you're building in your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, this one may be a little deep, but I was hiking and I had this thought, and I've been musing on it just off and on. The test, okay, here's the thought. The test isn't, can I love you? And do I love you? The test is, can I not hate you?
Hmm.
So we keep pushing, we need to love each other. And we all get it. Yes, we do need to love each other. The test is, can you not hate someone? Can you not hate them?
Right.
So, and I feel like we say things like, oh, I don't like them, or they really sorry, they really, I can't stand them, I dislike them. That we use these calmer, softer ways. And so the test now becomes, but can you at least show them love, whether you like them or not, whether you can stand them or you can't stand them. Now, can you show them love, or do we only love the people we're in agreement with? Do we only love the people that we are familiar to us, but can we love people that are unfamiliar, that have a different
Mhm.
path, a different way? So I feel like the test is, can I not hate? I don't think the test is, can I love, but can I not hate? And over
Mhm.
the last couple of years, I feel like that's been a message that's been resonating as, how do we hate less? Not how do we love more, which is true, that is the ultimate. But it's actually, how do we hate less? And then kind of figure out, how do I find those areas in my life where I've entertained a form of hatred,
Right.
a loathing, a dislike. And so I went, oh, wow. I find that is the harder test, because sometimes it feels good to not like somebody, or not like something, because then you can
Right.
complain about it. So I know I haven't gone very far with it, but is this something I've been thinking about trying to practice? How do I not show any, how do I just not go there, not entertain? How do I
Mhm.
keep myself away from that dark parameter?
Right.
And that one's I find harder than going, I'm gonna love everybody. I find when putting actionable items, it's just harder. I find that it's harder because sometimes you can't help but maybe get a little offended or a
Hmm.
little like taken back or a little like sour taste in your mouth. And so that was kind of my musings while I was hiking is how do I self-discipline or be self-accountable that I don't even entertain those negative feelings towards anybody.
Right.
I
Well,
don't
two
know.
things come to mind when you say that. So the first thing is it reminds me of some of our conversations where we've talked about this idea of how people change their minds and how people change.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is like, well, right. Why would we spend our time hating someone when we're very aware of, or something for that matter, when we're very aware of the fact that we might change our minds, we might change our viewpoint on it, the person or the thing that we're disliking or having loathsome feelings for may also change. So, so that's sort of the first thing that comes to mind when I hear you say that. This idea
See,
of like,
yeah.
well, of course, I wouldn't waste my time and energy because that opinion might change. So not only am I
Mhm.
giving this object or person the benefit of the doubt, but I'm also giving myself the benefit of the doubt that I
Yeah.
can change my mind.
Yes. Okay. So right before this recording, I was coaching a leader, and she was saying how we're on this life for such a short amount of time. We're on this planet. Like, I don't want to waste time on energy that doesn't make my life better, the world better. I just don't want to focus any time on anything that takes me away from just really wanting the world to be a better place. And I went, yes. Like when she was saying that to me, I was like, yes, that's exactly how I feel
Mhm.
too. Is this going to make me love the world more? Is this going to help me appreciate humanity more? Is this going to, like you said, I love, thank you for that reminder that I'm going to change anyway. I'm evolving constantly. And why hold on to something with such a strong opinion? And 10 years ago, I'll be like, what opinion? Like, I
Right.
remember that opinion. Like, it's not, it doesn't, if it's not enhancing my love for this planet and the humans on this planet, it's a waste of time.
Yeah. And then the other thing that comes to mind with this idea is, you're saying that in a way it's almost harder to not hate. So this idea of like, oh, can we expand our love? Okay. But what happens if we turn our eyes to can we not have hate or
Yeah.
and it makes me curious, and this is just a random little musing here, but I wonder if part of the reason that might be challenging is I think that as humans, we do have this tendency to really like binaries. So it's like, but if I'm not loving or if I'm not hating, like where's the in between? What emotion is that then? What happens if I don't necessarily agree with somebody, but I also don't mean them ill will, right? And so I think sometimes that those gray areas or those more nuanced places or feelings or opinions can be very challenging,
Mhm.
because it's not as easy as just saying, well, I love or I hate this thing.
Yeah. Yes. I just really want to not hate.
Right.
Where that takes me on the love factor, I know it takes me closer to loving. I really want to exercise a better relationship when I feel that feeling,
Right.
or when I feel that reaction coming. I just want to. It's life's too short. I don't want to spend time having those negative. I just don't
Feeling.
want to
Yeah.
anymore.
No, it makes
And
sense.
this is the quest I'm on. So okay.
I like it. Okay,
Your turn.
we have 10 minutes, and
Okay.
so I'm just going to breeze through one of mine really quickly so we can spend more time on our last for each of us. Um, so one of my second point, or one of the second things I had was, and it is a bit in line with what you're just talking about, this idea that just establishing boundaries, having conversations with people of those natures, like it is just very uncomfortable. And I think I
Mm,
know it seems really simple, like, yes, having an uncomfortable conversation about boundaries is uncomfortable. Duh.
right.
But it's weirdly hard to wrap your brain around because I think it's really easy to understand I need to establish boundaries with my friend, my mom, my dad, whatever it may be, my coworker, it's easy to recognize you need those boundaries. Setting them, a lot more difficult. Very, very challenging. It's very challenging to tell somebody something such as, hey, I know that you really mean well, but right now I need you to not make comments about my weight. Like, hey, I need my weight comments to be off limits because I'm going through something right now. Like, the way I said it, that's a really easy statement to just set a boundary. I need this thing to be off limits in our conversations. That's like it. You can't argue that. I'm just telling you what I need. But imagine actually saying that to a friend
Oh,
or a coworker or like it's very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable.
it is really hard because you hope the person will pick up the cues,
Right.
the subtle cues, and we don't.
Right.
We
Yeah.
don't pick up, and or you hope that by you not talking about it is enough to show that you're not interested in that, or you're not.
Yes. We go to this the silence speaks louder than words sort of
Yeah,
mentality, right? I think it
yeah,
can be easy to just, well, I'm just not going to talk about it, and then they'll pick up the hint. But
yeah.
what would be better is to set
To
the
just say it.
uncomfortable.
Okay, so okay, let's go here. We're not brushing over this topic. This is a good one. What how do you empower that? How do we grow the muscle of communicating really clear boundaries or limits to
Mhm.
topics or
Well, for me, I've found the thing that I've been working on this year, and that's why it's been a big year takeaway for me, is that this is an easier thing to practice with people you're very close with. So I've been practicing making these sorts of statements and setting boundaries with the people I'm closest with. So Victor, my husband, my family, people that I've known for a very, very long time. And I've had a lot of success, and I'm feeling a lot more comfortable and confident in my ability to establish boundaries in those arenas of my life. But what I've found is that it does become more difficult when it just comes to your friendships, a coworker relationship, something that doesn't necessarily have as much, connective tissue, so to speak. Um,
do you think that we don't even know what our boundaries are? Like, do you think before you state them, you have to talk to someone and go, hey, let's play a game? Let's, what do you think your top three boundaries are in for the 2022 so that we can hold each other to it and we can actually hear what the boundary is? Because sometimes it doesn't feel right, but we don't know what to do. We don't know what to say, and we're polite or whatever.
oh yeah,
But I don't
100%.
even know, like, even now I'm like, what are my boundaries? And are
Well,
they boundaries or are they just preferences? Like,
right. And I
you
think
know,
this goes back to your very first point that you brought in this today was this idea of listening to yourself and listening to your body. And I think for me, that's been a really, as I mentioned, I've also been working on that. And it's because it's tied to this boundaries thing. Because if I can really listen to myself in that moment, if I can listen to my body, and if I can get out of my intellectual head, then oftentimes our body does have the answer for us as to where that boundary needs to be. Because if something is making you feel uneasy, like that's probably because there's a boundary that you need there.
mhm. Okay, so that I have this thought. Could it be that when you listen to your body when it comes to boundaries, your limbic takes over and it's fight, flight, freeze? So if you think about boundaries and you feel frozen, I don't like this, I'm not comfortable. This is, I feel like, but you don't go, I think someone is, not honoring my boundaries. That's not maybe what happens at first. I think what happens is you get a freeze.
Hmm.
I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, but I don't like this, and I don't know why I don't like this, but why is this uncomfortable? I really don't want us going here. And we freeze, and we got to figure out, why am I freezing? Why is my body freezing right now? Or if I'm fidgety, or like I'm wanting to leave the conversation quickly, or I just want to get the phone or whatever, like that, what is your body trying to say? So there's maybe some of that as well, as we
Right.
don't know. So it'd be good for us to figure out what our body and our boundaries are trying to communicate. So when it happens, we can go, oh wait, that's a boundary. Oh, when I freeze like that, that's me saying someone's crossing. Okay, rehearse my speech, rehearse
Right.
my speech. Yeah.
Definitely.
Hmm.
Okay, we have just a few minutes left. What was your third takeaway,
You
Karen?
know what? I'm gonna let you do the third one because my third one is fine. Like the other two, listening to my body and how do I practice? How do I do more steps away from any form of hate whatsoever? Those are my two big ones.
Okay.
So I want to hear your third.
Okay, well, my third, so I have to give credit to two other people for my third
Okay.
one. So
Okay.
the first person is Krista Tippett, who has a podcast called On Being. If you haven't heard it, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's amazing. And the second person is Stephen Batchelor. So I have read some of Stephen Batchelor's work, but Krista Tippett on the podcast On Being actually did an interview with Stephen Batchelor, and it was all about this idea of the art of being alone. And I came across this work based off of somebody else's recommendation because I had been having a conversation about how during the pandemic, I'm a glass half full person. I like to find silver linings, take it or leave it. It's what I like to do. And for me, I've been trying to find silver linings in the pandemic because it's been hard. It's been a hard time for everyone. I feel confident making that statement for all people. It's been hard. And for me, one of the things that I was have really discovered with myself during this time was this idea of like not really knowing how to be alone and realizing through the isolation, I moved right before the pandemic hit. I lost all of my community. Well, I mean, they exist, but very, very far away.
Mhm.
And I didn't have time to build a new one in my new home. And so I really felt alone in a way that I hadn't felt in a very long time, if ever. And what I really like about Stephen Batchelor's work and this particular podcast episode that he did with Krista Tippett was that they talk all about this idea of like aloneness and solitude and what that looks like. And two things that I'll specifically share are this idea, and I'm paraphrasing, so I'm not going to get it exactly right. But first, the idea that if we aren't taught or we don't learn how to be alone in our childhood, then what will end up is we'll end up feeling lonely because there's a difference between loneliness and being alone. And if you're not taught, if you don't learn the skill of being alone, then what instead you'll have is the feeling of loneliness. And that really was a big aha moment for me. This idea of, okay, so I know how to be lonely when I'm by myself,
Wow.
but I don't
Mhm.
necessarily know that I know how to be alone and how to
Wow.
have that be a comfortable feeling that I can sit in that can actually be empowering, and I can find calm and peace and all these other things in it, because what instead happens is I often feel lonely. And so there's been a lot of reflection for me in my life and like looking at the different times throughout my childhood where maybe I took the message in of loneliness rather than finding empowerment and being alone. But that was a really big thing for
Mm.
me. And
Mm.
the other second thing from that podcast and from Stephen Batchelor's work that I took away is this idea, and it reminds me of the old saying, like, you need to love yourself before you can love someone else. But this, similarly with aloneness, like, you need to be able to master this art of aloneness. You need to be able to
Mhm.
sit completely with yourself and be
Mhm.
completely alone before you can then go and forge a connection with another individual who hopefully
Mhm.
also knows how to be alone. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, you're just two lonely people that are trying to like fill this void, but you're not
Wow.
people that are empowered people that know how to be alone with themselves, that can then use that to forge connectivity. um, so
Wow.
that's been like a really really big one for me this year,
Mm.
this idea of aloneness.
What is the bridge to move from loneliness to alone? What is one of the bridges that you noticed you start doing differently to move from one to the other? Or that you're talking with your friends about, or that you're telling everybody about? What is that one piece?
I think for me it's the recognition, right? I think I'm still in the phase of, you know how like you have to understand there's a problem or you have to know there's a problem before you can go about fixing it, right? So I think for me I'm still in that awareness phase. This phase of okay, what's that feeling? Am I feeling lonely? Okay, why am I feeling lonely? And then trying to essentially like talk myself through why am I feeling lonely and can this feeling turn into just a feeling of being alone versus a feeling of being lonely? So that I, for myself, can understand what that difference is, what the difference of those two feelings is, because they are very different. Um, and before I didn't really understand what that felt like for myself. So it just all felt the same.
One of my favorite things you said was learn the art of being alone, and your partner, when you have a partner and they learn the art of being alone, you're both not bringing loneliness into the relationship. But if
Hmm.
you don't learn the art of being alone and you're still in the loneliness mindset, you're that means two lonely people. Like that's more something that as a couple you'll have to work through and navigate. So
Right.
that was really well said when you said that. I was like, whoa.
Well,
Wow.
I my credit goes to Krista Tippett and Stephen Batchelor. So again, we'll link this their
Yeah,
podcast in our bio. I highly recommend it.
so good.
But
All right,
with
here we
that being
go.
said, we are a few
Yeah,
minutes over, so we're going to cut ourselves off. But thank you all for listening to Do That Well. Thank you for joining us through 2021.
yeah, thank
And
you.
we're excited for 2022. We have some new ideas and you'll see some changes, but we'll talk more about that in the new year.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Happy New Year.
Thanks.